actually Dr. Frank came with and interviewed a woman who was a resident, kind of like a bedridden person. I didn't go into the house at all. I was taking mainly on the septic system issues and verifying topics. But as a result, the woman was brought to like an assisted living home, and the report I got this morning was that she was doing very well, and there was, I guess, some worry that she wasn't going to be, I guess, cooperative about leaving, but I think at the last minute she decided that it was okay, and now she seems to be happy that all that worked out. The property is going to be eventually cleaned up, and the septic system is at the time of property transfer or something, because we think that the bank is going to take it over, that all of that's going to be fixed. So was I would say the most positive result that we could ask for there.
It looks like it was a team effort between the Health and Human Services and Code Enforcement, and Community Development, and the Sheriff's Office. Great, good job.
Yeah, nice work.
Thank you. Anything else, Ira? Randy? Joel?
The only thing is the ongoing saga with the historic courthouse clock. It seems to be on everybody's mind lately. We're still having issues with it, and we've got folks up there once again looking at it to see what the issues are. We thought we had it fixed last week, but I think it was Friday at 2:35 it once again stopped working, which we don't know that that's ever going to happen before. We're ferreting the problem out, and we're going to get it fixed. Hang in there. Have faith.
Hopefully it's nice to know how many people care.
More care recently. A lot of interested folks.
That clock for public knowledge was built in.
Well, it's there are a couple different stories. One's quite not accurate about it sitting on a dock for a while, but it's 1914. The bell is cast in 1914, and the clock, I believe, was around a year, maybe a year or so prior to that.
So there's probably not a lot of people who work on these things.
No, there's not. The guy that actually did flew in from Miami, where he was last week, working on. He works on clocks all over the country. But he was the guy that tore it down for us last year and cleaned it up. So we're still under warranty for that. So he comes back.
Great. So I just that's maybe why it sits for so long. Sometimes it's just not a quick. Look someone up on Google to get here.
No, it's not. We've been fortunate to have a local fellow here that has kept it going over the years. But he's getting ready to step down and retire, and I don't know who's going to fill his shoes.
Okay, thanks. Contracts and agreements.
Thank you. Item 2A is a contract addendum and purchase order for the assessor's office from PAC's mobile field units that have been in the budget for the last 3 years. And finally, the bugs have worked out enough, as we heard in work session, that they're going to move forward and start training June 7th. So money is in the 2016 budget to cover these costs.
And I move to approve the contract addendum and purchase order for PAC's mobile field units.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any questions, comments? Just a briefing on it a few minutes ago. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Item 2B is an agreement with the Western Federal Lands Highway Division for improvement of East Beach Road. As we heard in work session back on May 23rd, this is a county match. It's $279,720 for the $1,792,280 of Federal Lands Access Program money being projected. Money is in the budget.
Move to approve the agreement with Western Federal Lands Highway Division for the improvement of East Beach Road.
I second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions, comments?
Just as a clarification, did you want the agreement approved or do you want the board to agree to allow the chair to sign the MOU, or does it matter?
I think that our motion implies that I'll sign it.
Okay,
Typically with the federal, it is the chair. It's a good catch.
so is that motion sufficient
I
then?
think so.
Okay.
So it's implied that the chair will sign the memorandum of agreement. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
And item 2C is amendment number 1 with Washington State Department of Social and Health Services to add funding for developmental disabilities. It's additional funds in the amount of $44,370, as we heard back in work session on May 23rd.
Move to approve Amendment 1 with Washington State Department of Social and Health Services.
Second?
It's moved and seconded. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Bids and awards.
Item 3A is a bid opening for the Clallam County Courthouse grounding project.
And how many bids do we have?
Just one?
Okay. So we have a bid from Alburn Grove Construction, 336 Benson Road. Their base bid is $325,763, alternate number 1, $26,662 for a total bid of $352,425, and their bid bond is attached. I assume, Joel, you're overseeing this?
Yes.
So is there a motion to refer?
I move to refer the bid to the Parks, Fairs, and Facilities Department for further consideration.
Moved and seconded, referring this to Joel Winborn, Director of Parks Fair and Facilities, for his review and recommendation back to the board. Any further questions or comments? Is that within your budget?
It's over.
Okay, we'll take a look at it and report back to us.
Certainly.
Okay. Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Administration.
Item 4A is a resolution acknowledging receipt of the addendum to the 5-year prevention plan. As you mentioned, we had that in work session last week.
Move to approve the resolution acknowledging receipt of addendum to the 5-year prevention plan.
Second?
It's moved and seconded. Any further questions, comments? Do you want to add anything? You've read through it, you're good?
Definitely.
Recommend we pass it?
Yes, please.
Think it's a good idea?
Yes.
Just fully supportive?
Completely.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Boy, you do move public opinion, look at that. Unanimous approval right out of the gate, so. The first of many, probably.
All right, item 4B is a resolution reestablishing membership categories of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and the reestablishment of structure of 1 representative of the City of Port Angeles, 1 from the City of Sequim, 1 from the City of Forks, 1 from Clallam County, 2 representatives from the solid waste industry, 1 representative from Clallam County business community, 1 representative from tribal governments, and 1 representative in the citizen at large category.
And I move to approve the resolution reestablishing membership categories for the Solid Waste Advisory Committee.
Second? Any question?
It's moved and seconded, any questions, comments?
How does this composition differ from the composition prior?
I could answer that.
Please.
It
Come on up,
was,
Megan, come on up to the microphone and state your name and title. Thanks.
my name is Megan Nieper. I'm the solid waste coordinator for Clallam County. And essentially, it previously read that the Clallam County representative had to have, I don't remember the exact wording, but was had solid waste administrative duties, and we just sort of broadened that. We're having difficulty achieving a quorum, and we wanted to allow someone representing Clallam County to be appointed by the board. It could even be, it could be a citizen, or it could be someone, within the county government. So we just kind of broadened it to try to make it more inclusive to achieve our goals and to achieve the quorum. So
Don't
that's
the
that.
cities actually appoint a city council member, don't they?
Yes, they do. And we, if you recall, a few months back, I came just to a work session and we talked about having Mark as a representative. We did get some counsel from Trish actually, that might make it difficult if we were to bring issues before the board. It would shrink Mark may have to recuse himself, so we're sort of questioning that, if that would be the most effective way to, if his membership in SWAC would just, come up, it would make it difficult in the future if we had to bring issues before the board for a vote. So I think we'll come back at our next meeting and see. Bob Martin is currently the representative for Clallam County, but as you know, he's sort of looking towards retirement, so we're just trying to find someone to fill his position, so.
Was that someone out of the prosecutor's office that gave you that advice? Because we serve on all kinds of committees that then we vote on issues. So why don't you have Jim take a look? Would you?
I can do
I
that.
don't think this, like you serve on the LPAC and you vote on the funding for the LPAC. And we have for years, so I don't know if that's, I don't remember ever operating under those guidelines, so I guess we'll better clarify that with the prosecutor's office.
That would be great, and
That
that's,
would change a lot.
well, we just had our last SWAC meeting in May, we'll have our next one in July, and again, that, just right before this resolution came up, Trish actually mentioned it. So then we, again, are just reconsidering who we want to appoint to that position, or who we recommend to be in that position.
Yeah, I'll find out where Trish came up with that. That's the first I've heard of it.
Yeah, I don't think that's how the board's been operating over for
Okay.
16 years I've been here. So.
Yeah, and I was going to look into it myself and discuss it with various members, so.
Well, we'll clarify that and find out where that came from, if it came from the prosecuting attorney's office, if that's now a new advice. I don't want to speak too much further, but if it is new advice from the prosecutor, then we need to take a look at all the committees we serve on.
I'll look
Yeah,
forward
we'll
to
figure
that.
that out. So,
Yeah, I'll look forward to that
Okay.
information.
all right.
But either way, that's just the just how it's changed.
So it doesn't change the resolution. Instead of saying one representative active in the committee, it just says one representative of Clallam County.
Exactly.
So Bob's still serving until he retires, but at some point he's retiring, so we need to make a change.
We've made the change in order to, again, just
Well,
sort
we
of
need to-
broaden the pool
We need to
of,
make a change with him.
yes,
Okay.
the exact member. So yes.
Is that true?
Any other questions?
Yep, thanks, Megan.
Any other questions? So we'll clarify the prosecuting attorney's office what that all means as far as board involvement on committees that make recommendations to the board of commissioners. Right, Jim?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, reestablishing the categories of the solid waste advisory.
Item 4C is a notice of hearing to be held at 10:30 a.m. June 14th for the proposed grant from the Opportunity Fund to the William Shore Memorial Pool District. And as you may recall, last week in work session, you talked about it, directed staff to bring forward a notice of hearing. Here it is.
Move to approve the notice of hearing to be held 10:30 a.m. June 14, to propose a grant from the Opportunity Fund to William Shore Memorial Pool District.
Second.
It's moved and seconded, and in this case, legal counsel for the pool district advised that Bill and I abstained from the vote, and the board of commissioners for the pool district. So the resolution the pool district passed was signed by Brad Collins, Anna Manelli, and Sherry Kidd, with Bill and I abstaining. That was at the advice of legal counsel from the pool district. It's moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Budget.
Item 5A is a resolution adopting the following supplemental appropriation under chemical dependency mental health, receipt of additional money from the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services in the amount of $47,238, and the attached supplemental appropriation budget change form shows how that would be spread.
I move to approve the resolution adopting the supplemental appropriation for chemical dependency and mental health.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. No community development items, no public works. We have a public hearing, which is pretty much right now. Consider it, so we'll have a public hearing on consideration of a resolution adopting the following debatable emergencies. So, do you have a staff report, Jim?
Just what you have in front of you, I don't know, Eva, are you prepared? Do you want to talk about the staff report, the need for this budget emergency?
Yes, sir. There was leftover professional service money that was unspent in the budget from last year that we brought forward for the city mental health 110% task force. This will be put into their fund balance, and as we come up with new ideas for expenditures or new needs come up, that money would then be drawn back out of that and placed back in the expenditure line.
This is just 2015 monies?
Yes,
And at the time of building the 2016 budget, we had anticipated it would have been spent before year end, and it just didn't get done. So.
and we think the reason some of it was not spent is the Apple Health and people getting on Medicaid, so they didn't need to go to this fund in order to pay for the service. So our contractors were not billing as much as we had expected and what their contracts indicated.
And there's also a sheriff's emergency patrol car replaced.
Yes, and under sheriff's operations, this was the cost which we had in work session a couple of times to pay the repair costs for patrol vehicle number 329 that was damaged in an accident in April in the amount of $12,000.
So, any questions of Jim? Nobody signed up to testify. We'll open the public hearing. If there's no objection. No one has signed up on the sign-up sheet. Is there any member of the public wishing to make comment on either one of these budget debatable emergencies? Seeing no one, it's the will of the board.
Move to close the public hearing?
A second?
Moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Motion to adopt the resolution.
Yeah, I move to approve the resolution adopting debatable emergencies in the amount of $257,000 for Health and Human Services and $12,000 for Sheriff's operations.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any further comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. That completes our agenda for this week. Is there any member of the public wishing to make general comment before the board? If not, the calendar stands. It's actually there's no other meetings this week in which the board will be present together. So we'll continue this week's meeting until next Monday morning at 9 a.m. There's no objection. No objection, so ordered. Thank you very much. Join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Under Sheriff Campbell, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call.
Commissioner Ozias?
Here.
Administrator Jones?
I'm here.
And Commissioner Peaches, the Board of Natural Resources, hopefully they'll join us at 10:30 for the public hearing. Request for modifications, approval of the agenda.
I have no modifications to ask for.
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. So we have public comment for agenda items, and those would be items 1A through 3B. We do have a scheduled public hearing scheduled at 10:30. agenda item comment right now. This would be the time to make comment on items 1A through 3B.
Excuse me, could you clarify what you want to do about it?
So items 1A through 3B are available for comment. There's a public hearing at 10:30, which is on page 2 of the agenda.
Thank you.
Anybody want to make comment on items 1A through 3B? Seeing no one, consent agenda.
Thank you. Item 1A is approval of vouchers for the week of June 27th. Item 1B is approval of payroll for the period ending June 24th. And item 1C is approval of workers' compensation expenditures for the months of April and May.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
It's moved and seconded. Any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Reports and presentations, Commissioner Ozias.
Last Friday I attended a special event at the CRTC, the Composites Recycling Technology Center. Senator Maria Cantwell was there, and she led the ceremonial signing of $15 million worth of MOUs between Peninsula College, the CRTC, and the Institute for Advanced Composites Manufacturing Innovation. And it was an exciting event for the community, certainly an exciting event for the CRTC. And the comment that I made to one of the fellow members of my tour as we were walking through the new facility is that it felt to me like we were taking a step into the future, or certainly into Port Angeles' future. So I'm happy to report that things appear to be moving along in a very positive direction at the CRTC.
Administrator Jones.
Nothing for me.
Director Woodward.
Yes. Annette Warren, our building official fire marshal, attended FEMA training at the National Education Center this last week. It was sponsored by NFIP, the National Floodplain Service Program, and they only chose 2 people from each state to attend, so there were 30 people there. So. Then we've brought in 69 building permits in the month of June. And plus 20 others that are like heat pumps or manufacturing pumps. So there's going to be quite a bit of building going on. And there's a code change, so that's why it's such a big influx of permits. But we're going to continue to take in permits to the end of September for the old code and the new code. So we'll still have time to get these in the old code.
I just mentioned that beginning next Monday will be the start of our chip seal program, weather permitting, of course, and the roads that are going to be done are all posted on or available through the county road website. The plan is to start east part of the county, work our way to the west. So anybody has more specific questions, when and where, it kind of depends on how the weather treats us and the day by day. So please get hold of me if you want info.
Director Woodward.
The only thing I'd like to say is as of, excuse me, as of Friday afternoon and through 9:30 this morning, the historic courthouse clock is keeping time to the minute. So I have never heard so many concerns as I've heard over the past few months. And believe me, we are trying to fix the problem, but things are going great so far.
Thank you for that. Contracts and agreements.
Thank you. Item 2A is an interagency agreement with the State of Washington Administrative Office for the Courts for support of family and juvenile court meeting program, or court improvement program. There's no budgetary impact. The revenue funds and expenditures are already allocated in the budget. This is just the promulgation document that needs to be approved.
I move to approve the interagency agreement with the State of Washington Administrative Office of the Courts.
Moved and seconded. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Item 2B is a modification of the agreement with the United States Forest Service to increase funding and extend performance period to October 31st, 2017. All this was discussed in work session on June 27th.
And I move to approve the modified agreement with the United States Forest Service.
It's moved and seconded. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Item 2C is an agreement with Kathy J. Rowe to purchase an easement for the Olympic Discovery Trail project, all as described and discussed in work session June 27th. Total cost $677.57.
And I move to approve the purchase of an easement from Kathy J. Rowe.
It's moved and seconded to accept the agreement. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries.
And item 2D is amendment number 1 with the Department of Ecology to allocate existing grant funds to the education and outreach task and revise deliverable due dates. No change in the dollar amount, all as was discussed in work session on June 27th.
I move to approve Amendment 1 with the Department of Ecology.
It's moved and seconded. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Item 2E is modification number 5 to the participating agreement with USDA, Forest Service, Olympic National Forest to extend the performance period to December 31st, 2016 in order to expend the remaining funding in the amount of $15,000, all as was discussed in work session on June 27th.
I move to approve Modification 5 to the agreement with USDA, Forest Service, and Olympic National Forest.
It's moved and seconded to accept this modification. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Bids and awards.
Item 3A is a notice of call for bids to be received no later than 10 a.m. July 26, 2016 for the Courthouse Boiler Replacement Project, all as was discussed in work session on June 27th.
I move to approve the call for bids for the Courthouse Boiler Replacement Project to be received no later than 10 a.m. July 26th.
It's moved and seconded. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And the bid opening.
Item 3B is a bid opening for the mental health substance abuse intervention services in the public schools.
Sounds like we had. We'll get the bids.
Okay.
So we have two bids. So the first bid that I have is from Olympic Personal Growth Center and Swim. They have a total requested budget of $50,010. And they have a match fiscal in-kind required, which was $3,000, and they have all their qualifications listed.
Okay, and I have a bid from Peninsula Behavioral Health. Let's see here. I'm not sure if I'm looking at the same numbers as you were, because they're significantly different. Let me make sure I'm not missing something here. All right, well, Peninsula Behavioral Health calls out program expenses of $131,209 with a funding request for $111,528 and an other funds match of $19,681. So I move that we forward these bids to the Department of Health and Human Services for their review and advice.
So let's move to forward the bids to Health and Human Services for their review and recommendation back to the board.
Second. Oh, I moved it.
That was my second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. No administration, no budget, no community development, no public works. We do have a public hearing at 10:30. So is there any member of the public wishing to just make general comment at this time before we recess until the public hearing at 10:30? Seeing no one with general comment on any topic. There's no objection, we'll recess until 10:30, at which time we'll have the public hearing on the resolution possibly adopting our debatable emergencies. No objections, ordered. Okay, we're back in session. Scheduled public hearing. Consideration of resolution adopting the following debatable emergencies, and as I understand it, we have a pretty robust staff report. So I'll throw it over to Administrator Jones for the staff report.
Yes, thank you, and we do intend to go down the row with our staff report, starting with me and then over to Risk and Ridgesill, and then back to Mary Ellen, to Joel, to Ross, and follow up with prosecutor. So that's the order we want to do the staff report. My job is to talk about what is a debatable budget emergency and according to our policies. First of all, the notice on the hearing did indicate that we were asking for $550,000 out of the specific reserve that the board set up years ago, back I believe it was 2010, where we set aside $1 million for specific reserves in the general fund to be paid for insurance deductibles, and the discussion was any claims that those monies will be available by budget emergency only if ordered from the commissioners for any claims not paid for by risk pool. So the money's sitting there, the $1 million, it is restricted. We are asking for $550,000 to come from there to be sent into risk management to be used for this purpose. At the same time, I'd like to amend the ask for your consideration, or for you to consider amending the ask to only $518,000. At the time we did the call for hearing, we weren't sure what the totality of the closing costs were going to be in the offer, including plus closing costs. Turns out there's $17,990 some dollars. So we only need $518, or $7,998. So we only need $518. So that would be my request. Again, what is a debatable emergency? It is essentially the commissioners having a hearing. Instead of inflating the account, and this was the discussion at the time, instead of inflating the budget to put into it all things that we think are possible to be paid, back in November, the decision was made to trim that down to only those things that we believed would be paid in the budget, and then let anything else come through the auspices of a budget emergency. So essentially, what a budget emergency is a decision by the commissioners in the middle of the year to pay for something that, had we known about it, or that it was likely to happen during budget time, it would have been added to the budget. So that's the difference. So we're asking for the full amount of the proposed settlement, both pieces, plus the closing costs, which would be $518,000. Thank you very much. Throw it over to Risk.
Yes, with reference to the matter at hand, to report from the basis of the risk pool, this matter is not a coverage matter by the risk pool. And the risk pool stopped covering these matters approximately 5 to 6 years ago. And so it's a self-insured matter that would be handled by the county. And so we received a reservation of rights letter from the pool on this for our continued handling from the county's perspective. And that having been through this entire process, monitoring this entire process, going through the entire thing, from the risk perspective, where we have a high risk, high frequency type of a situation, I can tell you that from the risk management perspective for this matter, that I fully agree with the direction that the county's going on this, the decision the commissioners are making on this. And certainly we've been in consultation with the pool and the assigned legal counsel all the way through this process as well. So I'm very comfortable with this process and what we've been able to accomplish. By the way, I want to compliment all those who are involved in this process as we move through. It's truly an unusual set of circumstances. Certainly in talking with people at the risk pool, it's very, very unusual, but it's got a very positive return on the decision that was made as this team worked through that process, including the commissioners. Thank you very much.
So why is the settlement important to the development of community development? Because the settlement allows us to improve our community. By putting the settlement behind us and starting over, DCD will be able to improve our community. By not spending an exorbitant amount of time on a 17-year legal battle, but focusing on what we should be focusing on. Community planning, emphasizing economic development while improving our environment. It's important because it has given DCD and many other people and departments the opportunity to work together to come up with a great solution, not only for DCD, the Langs, the Sebelacs, and the citizens of Clallam Bay, but for all the citizens of Clallam County. It's important because it allows us to learn from our mistakes, particularly in the areas of records and retention. DCD is using a state-funded grant from the auditor's office to hire 2 part-time people to retain, archive, file, and purge all documents. So if a public records request like this happens again, we will know if we have it or not and where it is if we did have it. And finally, it's easy to criticize and walk away from a difficult problem. However, it's harder to roll up your sleeves and work together, not always in agreement, to come up with a plan and execute it for a common goal that is mutually beneficial to all. Now that's what's hard, and that's what's been done with this solution. Has perfection been met? No. But perfection is the enemy of invention. And invention is looking at the same old problem with a different set of fresh eyes. And invention is necessary for change. And invention is what I hope will change our county government.
So Joel, you want to show us the park things, and then Ross will show where the voting issues are.
Sure. Well, the wise man told me about a week ago that a picture's worth 1,000 words, and I think that's very true. And it was good advice. So taking that advice, along with Starlight and DCD, she helped me put together these maps. And I'm very grateful for that. But hopefully after going through this, I know you've heard a lot of words and a lot of discussions about what's what. Maybe once you see the photographs of what we're talking about, maybe it'll help you understand a little better. Excuse me. Well, basically, I think we all know we're talking about the west end out at Clallam Bay. What you're looking at here, this map is a small section of Clallam Bay on the east end. The uppermost area here is Slip Point, which is currently leased by the Sheriff's Department as a west end detachment. Down here at the bottom left, this is one of our county parks. This is Clallam Bay West. And all of this area in between that you see that's colored green is public access property. Our central or main county park is located right here just in the 90-degree turn there on Highway 112. This is county, and all of this green that you see going through here is owned by the Washington State Parks. The area that you see here in white, this is all privately owned. And there's a blow up, this little box is a blow up here, and these are the 3 properties that are in question or that we're talking about today. And here's just a little better picture to kind of help you orient yourself. Unfortunately, the Clallam River, you can't really see it with the overlay of the green, but the Clallam River flows and meanders through the site. Again, the Clallam County Park here, and a leased area here. And this is a blow up of the 3 properties that we're talking about. This is the Lang area. This is one parcel here, the second, and the Clallam. And for bearing, this is Saltaire Street, which dead ends right here, just short or shy of the Clallam River. And this is a photograph from the water side looking at the properties. This is the Clallam residence here, or their entire property would be here. There's the residence and the shop. And the Lang property extends down the beach here. And again, there's Saltaire Street. So, I was asked to talk a little bit about what our county park and recreation master plan talks about, specific to the way we make acquisitions. What are some of those proposed acquisitions that we have? How do we handle things when they come up, and that sort of things. It's a fairly detailed document, and if anyone's interested, it's located on our website, the parks website. But I'm just going to take a few examples out of here, and conscious of timing. But I'm going to start with Chapter 4, where it starts, where we talk about the critical need to acquire specific tidelands and beach accesses. And in that area, we have 2 areas that talk about Clallam Bay specifically, but I'll just focus on the one here, Clallam Bay Spit. And for those of you that don't know, for years the county has, at the central Clallam Bay Spit County Park, which is our middle park, or the main park, we have worked together with Washington State Parks to maintain those for many, many years. And in fact, state parks for a long, long time contributed dollars to us to help maintain that, but several years ago those were terminated. So this is what the jointly managed thing means there. There are still sections of tidelands to the west of our existing park, which are currently owned by Maryland Ring, and we've reached out to Maryland Ring in the past to talk to them about, okay, would you be interested in transferring those or possibly selling those to the county? And as it stands now, the answer is no. But here's one of the bigger points. There are private tidelands lying in between the state beach and the beach in front of the lighthouse, Clallam Bay Sheriff's Detachment area. And if you're familiar again with the area, these are quotes directly out of our master plan, but this is specifically the area in question that we're talking about. From the Clallam Bay Spit County Park to the Sheriff's Detachment at Slip Point. One of the problems that you see along the beach there with the public ownership, private ownership, it is confusing for people utilizing the beaches. So ultimately, we would like to have a continuous area so people don't get in trouble if they wander onto private lands. And finally, in a step forward to seeing that come to fruition, in 2010, we applied for a grant with the state RCO and were successful. And the RCO paid for half of the acquisition at the Clallam Bay West County Park. It's the one I showed you in the bottom left corner a few minutes ago. So in 2015, we took a community survey. This was the second time in the past 5 years or so that we did that. That survey ran last year from July 17th through November the 1st. And the first time we ran it, we had about 233 folks that submitted their comments. 2015, we had nearly 800, so there were a lot more interested people getting involved. And I'm thinking that probably when we do this again in a couple of years, we're even going to see more interested parties. But one of the questions was, I'm not going to take you through all the questions, I'm going to focus on 2 in particular. Question number 6 asked, rank your household's need of the following park and recreation facilities. And we listed 28 separate facilities. I'm not going to show you all those, I'm going to focus on the top 10 because they're important. By far, the recipients, the number 1 response was for waterfront parks. And to a lesser degree, number 6 for small neighborhood parks. And you can see some of the other things that we asked about. And there are another 18 or so questions that we asked people's input on. But by far, waterfront park acquisition is first and foremost. Another question we ask was, if funding is available, do you support the acquisition of additional parklands for public access? And a resounding 87% of those that filled in the survey said yes, 87.7. So that's a pretty good one. Moving on to Chapter 5 in our action plan. Just to state that it is and has always been a priority of the park board. We've had several park boards from the late 30s on to today. This has always been a main source of focus, is the acquisition of saltwater access points for the public, as well as freshwater beaches, because they become available as well. Further in the action plan, we talk about, we list 4 acquisition priorities. I'm only going to give you the first 2. The first being is to acquire new saltwater and freshwater access properties for water-dependent recreation, including water and well trails, and purchase tidelands wherever they link or expand public tideland uses. And the second one is to acquire properties that expand existing county parklands, and we've got both of those components occurring out in the area that we're talking about today. Further in the acquisition plan, or the action plan rather, is our acquisition program list. And here we list several properties throughout the county that we would really like to see acquired by the county. But the number 1 on the list, and this is what the chart looks like in the master plan. The first one, or number 1, is to acquire the Coast Guard station out at Slip Point. That's been something that's been in the works for many, many years now, and that process is actually underway for transfer from the Coast Guard to the county. We just don't know exactly when that's going to happen. Number 3, I took out number 2, but number 3 here is to acquire tideland access, and this is important, between Clallam Bay Spit County Park and Slip Point. Again, it's precisely the area that we're talking about today. And finally, a map of our proposed tideland and upland acquisitions. This takes a look at the entire northern coast of Clallam County, and there are 8 sections outlined here, but I'm going to focus on the 2 at the westernmost end, number 7 and number 8. And if you look down here, it tells you where all these areas are, but number 7 is from Deep Creek to Slip Point, excuse me, which is approximately there to there. This is the Clallam Bay area, Slip Point at the end. And number 8, Slip Point to Shipwreck Point, which begins here in this section of beach here. Now, all along this beaches, there are lots of, in some areas, there's different access points. Some owned by the DNR, some by other ownerships. We're just looking at trying to access those and to provide access for the public to use those. I guess that's pretty much it. I was told 3 minutes and I took 6, so.
Thank you, Joel. Ross, you want to talk about roads and impacts?
If I could, how do you run that thing forward and backwards? I just need to forward and backwards. I like leaving. Everybody got their red glasses on, okay?
You're going the wrong way.
Okay. Well, okay. For those, I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning, Joel, because you had a slide that was just perfect. The seasonal issue that affects roads department specifically, and it kind of affects the sheriff's department in the same way, is when the summertime tourists come in. The main park facility that Joel spoke about, that's got the bridge across to the spit and that kind of stuff, gets over full. People are routed down and into, get my finger out of the way, it needs a laser, into this area here, and the Lang property ends right there, but everything from the Lang property over here 60 feet and all the way out to here in an area about like this was deeded to County Road Department. At the same time this entire road section was deeded, the 60 feet of road section was way back in history. So that makes a publicly accessible right-of-way that goes all the way out and is adjacent to the Lang property. The attractive problem that Mr. Lang and others have kind of grappled with over the years is people come in, they have a right to park here, if without much in the way of direction, they park all over the place in front of driveways, and they'll get extended all the way up and down this section of road, and then the easiest way to walk is through this piece of property, which is private property. So if this particular acquisition moves forward, this presents an opportunity for the road department to work with the property owners along here and see if we can't, we haven't even been involved in this long enough to be able to put a plan together, but my process would be if this goes through, get in touch with the local property owners here. We understand, everybody understands that people will come here, people will park. How do we facilitate that in a manner that is organized and is the least disruptive for the people who are living here all the time and up and down this road? So they're not parking in front of driveways. People will be attracted to spots where we can actually where people see, yeah, I know this is a spot where I can park. We have long talked about the possibility, but we just never had any venue at which to acquire the property. This has popped up. It wasn't driven by us, but certainly if this takes place, the road department can work together with the Parks Department to facilitate some type of public organization here for parking and access that I think is going to end up working better for the residents there that have to put up with the parking in the first place. It's primarily a summertime thing. So that's kind of where our part is, and we haven't had a chance to when I say we're going to do parking, I don't want anybody jumping to the conclusion that we're going to, perhaps if this goes through and is approved, that we pave everything. That goes clear outside of the environmental issues that we'd have to deal with, but we can do stuff. There's some stuff here that we can do to tune it up, to make it better for the public and for the people who live out there. So that's where I'm going to leave it at this point, and you can feel free to get back to me with more details as we move forward.
Thank you, Ross. Mark?
So, Commissioners, I would remark that the county obviously finds itself in a very difficult legal position, and based on application of the law to the facts that present, I believe that a limited settlement is a good outcome. In relation to a bad situation, to be clear. I don't want to sugarcoat that at all. The fact of the matter is that we're dealing with a circumstance where there's still an active litigation. I know there's been a great desire by the board on the one hand, the other county involved officers to be as transparent as possible. I certainly share that desire as well. At the same time, there are very legitimate reasons for which I think the county is constraining its ability to go too much further at this point in time with an active litigation on the books and saying more than it already has. That said, when the case is concluded, an order of dismissal is signed, there will be a greater opportunity for a much broader discussion as to the 17-year history that's led up to where we are. There will be a greater opportunity to discuss lessons learned. And so I want to underscore that, again, I think there's probably going to be, and there are very many questions being asked. We can have answered some of those, but others were constraining our ability to address. Ultimately, I believe that the proposed settlement is one that is in the county's best interest, really for three reasons. First, the mediated settlement agreement would result in dismissal of the current active public records lawsuit. And in addition, it would serve to resolve fully and finally any related claims that could be brought in the future. And we
say a claim, that's just a different phrase essentially for another lawsuit that could be filed based upon the same 17-year history of facts. And so in resolving one suit, you're actually resolving likely a series. Second, the resolution contemplated, while quite expensive, is a good one, I believe. And it will serve to cap the county's financial liability, which is particularly important in this case because we're dealing with non-insured monies. So these are taxpayer dollars. There is a fiduciary duty that attaches as to the board certainly and other officers to do everything they can to safeguard the public fisc. And I believe that this resolution does just that. And then last but not least, I would simply echo what you've already heard today from Mr. Winmore, Mr. Tyler, from Mary Ellen as well, in that the resolution will result in the taxpayers not simply receiving a piece of paper which speaks in terms of the lawsuit having been dismissed, which is what normally happens, but there will be expansion of the existing saltwater access park. And I think that that's a positive coming out of a very challenging situation.
So that would wrap up the staff report. Again, recommendation would be that for the budget emergency, that we would only need $518,000, which would be the entirety of the settlement. The account, the risk management account currently has balance left in the existing budget authority of $330,587. This is available today. We could spend that money. However, we have future items that we did anticipate coming up in the budget when we built that. So while we could use that money right now, if we felt like it for part of the settlement, there's not enough to do the whole settlement. The board decided no, we wanted to do the full amount, a public hearing, full transparency of the entirety and deal with it that way. So that would be our staff report. It would open to any of us any questions that the board would have.
Any questions from members of the board? And Bill, can you still hear us?
Bill, are you still there?
So we apparently lost Christian.
Sorry, I didn't know if you have me now.
Oh, we have you now, yes.
I apologize for not attending in person. It's an important meeting, but I'm in Olympia, and I've just completed a meeting with the Board of Natural Resources. One thing I'd like to share, people called me on this video over the weekend, and a common question that was presented to me was, who came up with this idea? And I'd just like for the record to state that this was an idea that I tabled. And then after some discussion, got some solid traction. But if there's any question about the idea of who originated this, I take full responsibility.
Do you have any questions on the staff report, Bill?
No, I think we're good.
No questions on the staff report.
Okay. If there's no objections, then we'll open the public hearing. I'm assuming there's a sign-up sheet that has signatures on it. So we'll go down the list of signatures and then we'll open it up for anybody else who hasn't signed up yet. So first is Steve Fager from SWIM. Come on up and state your name for the record. You listed your address, so that's good.
Morning. Steve Fager, 11 Glendale Drive, Swim. Thank you for this opportunity. Very nice presentation you guys put together. I have a few brief questions just so I can understand some of the details of how this is happening and what we're doing. One of them was, you didn't get the name of the risk management person?
Rich Sill.
Rich Sill, are you the director from Clallam County or are you out of Olympia?
No, I'm the director from Clallam County, assigned to the risk pool, Washington County's risk pool.
The other question I have is on the draft, we've got 4 signatures and I don't recognize them. One of them is Forbes. Where does he play into this picture?
That's Duncan Forbes. He is the counsel for Patterson Buchanan.
Patterson Buchanan. And in the bottom, ROSOS, whose signature is that? then I have a couple other questions, just briefly, yeah. Trying to understand the history of this and how we got to this place. Every time that I've dealt in real estate, which I've been in for over 30 years, to change the use of a property, we were required to put up 90 days notice, signage, and put it in the paper, all of these requirements in order to notify surrounding people. Has that process been done? Not yet. Okay. Back when the bulkhead was built, did the Corps of Engineers, were they involved in approving the bulkhead? Because every time I tried to build a dock, I had to do an environmental impact statement. And the Corps of Engineers was the one we had to deal with for anything with salt water. Was it involved back when they built the bulkhead? You're not sure? Okay. Another question is, was there ever a SEPA done on this for the change of use?
For the contemplated change of use or the one back then?
The one that we are right now.
We haven't even gotten there yet, so
Okay.
we're just about purchasing.
It won't happen until later when we
Okay,
turn
so
it into a park.
the review is after the fact.
Right.
Oh, shoot, I lost my thought. I'm sorry, I lost my thought. Oh. Have the neighbors within 1,000 feet been, or it still have to be done after we bought it? Oh. I guess that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. James Preston.
Yes, James Preston, 3002 South Maple Street, Port Angeles. As a resident of the county, I want to compliment the commissioners on this resolution. A lot of counties find themselves these days accidentally not providing documents that are requested in a timely manner. They write very large checks and they get nothing for it. In this situation, you are acquiring real property, and it's property that the county had previously identified as being desirable to have in your park system. I did not live here when that survey was taken about what would be the priorities as far as what the Parks Department would provide, but I would have been one of the ones that voted for the waterfront. You've done a great job here, and I compliment you. On Thursday, and I hope more people get involved in their county government. On Thursday, there was a hearing here where there was a discussion about changing the process by which documents would be provided when citizens request them. The comments were great. There was input by the commissioners that were here, by the department heads, by department employees. I've been involved in this in the industry, also in the government, in document request for way too long in the past. I was allowed to give a couple of suggestions, and you've got a county here that's going to fix this process. It's complicated. How many of you who've lived in the same place for 25 or 30 years can go out in your garage or in your own personal office that you might have and put your fingers on every single document? If you have a PC, the documents on those. If the PC that you used 5 years ago but no longer used, go to that PC. That's what it's like to respond to these document requests. And I believe, I could be wrong on this, that the Langs put in 4 of them over time. You could have multiple people responding to them. Accidents do happen, but your county is making every effort to fix it, and you've got something out of this, that real property, and I commend you. I think you've done a great job, and if you have anyone at all trying to upset the settlement, trying to intervene or do anything, I hope you rapidly respond to it, and I hope you seek damages from them. Thank you very much.
Bill Brickman.
built Riveton, 1964, East Green Bay Road. Let me be blunt, don't do it. I'm not going to tell you it's the best or worst solution possible, but I'm going to tell you that I don't see the answer as obviously as apparently some people here do. This is a public hearing, and what I've heard is a public conclusion. We had the county staff tell us why they've continued this and why it's good for us. There have been a couple of questions asked. Is there nobody still on county staff that could have answered some of those questions about what happened when? That's what I would have expected a public hearing, a more complete history of what went on. The way the public information has eked out into the public raises some questions of openness, responsiveness, and integrity. Some of the individuals who have been involved in this error over time are now deeply involved in making recommendations on how to solve it. Conflict of interest comes to play. I've heard of nobody recusing themselves. No need to identify each person. I think the folks in the room making the decisions have a better answer. I might. I will point out that sending out a memo in 2010 declaring that all departments should coincide with the combined or coordinated effort to answer information requests is not a solution. It's not even a Band-Aid. It's simply identifying that there's a problem. The corporate approach to issues and results is to measure them. When you measure something, you get results. People perform to required measurements. So I ask, where's the accountability? No measurement, no accountability. What happened? I don't have enough information to answer that. I know that something bad happened, and frankly, from the outside, it looks like a lot of sweeping under the rug has been going on. Whether burying it under my checkbook, my legal checkbook is deeper than yours, or whether it's just, let's hope it goes away, we'll wait 17 years. Again, I'm not saying this is the worst solution that could come out. I question the process. I question why it's now so many years later, and just last week, we held a public hearing regarding how to fix the basic problem behind all this, and that is the request for information. This is not a solution to how the request for information issues that this county faces. Sorry, but that's the law. The county is not given an option. So it behooves the county to figure out how to deliver on that. So I don't know, is this a rush to action? Have we talked to the neighbors? Or not? Is this a necessary legal rush to action after, I was surprised to hear, it's now 17 years this issue has been bouncing around. Again, I don't have the answers. I would have hoped to have more of the answers based on this being a public hearing, but I don't have them now. So I'll repeat myself, don't do it. Not because I think it's the worst solution out there, but because I don't see the logic behind it, and I don't see the solutions in the history of the recent history of this county on fixing the basic core problem of errors and responding to information requests. Thank you.
Francisco de la Cruz.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this morning. And I'm addressing this to the commissioners, Mr. Jones, Mr. Nichols, and Mr. Still. It is unfortunate that we find ourselves in a situation where we have to spend a ton of other people's money to make right what should not have gone wrong in the first place. I attended last week's specially called meeting regarding public records disclosures and the current state of practice in Clallam County. I mentioned to Commissioner Ozias after the meeting that you had provided several avenues for further litigation as a result of the meeting, and corrective action plans I heard briefly alluded to, but not fully developed. I was extremely disappointed in what I heard coming from the leadership of the organization. It appeared to an outside observer that the conclusion was that these papers or records had somehow decided to hide themselves from the appropriate personnel to disclose them to the public when requested. The concept of accountability does not appear to play a major role in the decision-making processes of the county. There seems to be little to no accountability for the results that we are now being told about years after some of these events occurred. Mr. Jones mentioned a memo that he had written back in 2010. Mr. Sill talked about developing a training program to roll out in the future. Mr. Nichols mentioned many things but said little of his direct involvement in this debacle. Yes, in my mind, this constitutes a debacle. 17 years in the making. There is no reasonable, acceptable explanation for the complete and utter failure of this organization to enact processes and procedures that are in response to legal requirements and obligations. The fact that some folks might find these procedures onerous or burdensome does not give them a pass on fulfilling their responsibilities. This, in my professional opinion, is a failure of county leadership. Mr. Jones, as the Chief Administrative Executive Officer for the county, in my opinion, falls on you to ensure that everyone in the organization is compliant with the law. Writing memos about the responsibilities and then not having any meaningful follow-up action to ensure compliance is, in my mind, a dereliction of duty. Mr. Sill, as head of HR, it falls upon you to establish the proper policies, procedures, and requisite training to ensure that county personnel can successfully perform their duties and responsibilities. Further, it falls upon you to ensure that performance management processes reinforce, as necessary, behaviors that are in compliance with legal requirements. It became apparent from the discussion at last week's special meeting that there were significant gaps, not just in the training, but also in the performance management aspects of this subject matter. I see this as a failure of leadership. Mr. Nichols, as the attorney for the county, it is your responsibility to mitigate the legal risks faced by the county in the performance of responsibilities. In this particular series of events, you have been a key player in the negative outcomes we now face. As the most knowledgeable player regarding the various intricate ins and outs of public disclosure law, it would seem that you would have a most paramount role in ensuring the county's compliance with this law. In my opinion, you have failed miserably in this. To cover the $550,000, now $518,000 settlement will require an additional property valuation of over $5.7 million. That's economic development to keep us even had this not occurred. Using an average home price of $220,000 per home, that's another 26 homes you got built and valued to stay even had this not taken place. What else could the county pay for with $550,000, now $518,000? You are offering a park out of the blue, substantiated by previous things. It's not totally out of the blue, but it certainly wasn't a key priority in the budget-making process last year. Have those neighborhoods been notified? That was asked previously. No, they haven't. Have the total cost of acquiring and maintaining this previously unidentified park been calculated? Unlikely. Do we really know what the total cost of this failure to be? Is this use of scarce taxpayer-funded resources the best use of those resources? I highly doubt it. In conclusion, and based on the fact that this quote-unquote problem has percolated under the radar for quite some time, with most, if not all, of the same key players in the same leadership positions they currently hold, it is only reasonable to ask that you folks resign from your positions and allow other, more effective leadership to come forward. Failing that, I would ask the 3 current commissioners to clean up shop. We can't afford you. At the rate of pay each of you are commanding, your performance on this issue alone is sufficient for me, as a professional in the HR to conclude that we're not getting our money's worth. Do the right thing. Let more competence come to the fore. We cannot afford this way of doing business. Thank you for your attention.
Richard Wade.
Good morning. Since I totally concur with the last speaker, I just want to thank Mr. Chapman for having the ethical, principled vision to vote against this debacle in the entire meeting. It should have been brought to the public's eye a long time ago, and it's only come to the forefront today. This is ridiculous. Nothing but psychobabble today, trying to sell us a bill of goods that I hope Mr. Chapman continues to see the direction and has continued the vision of doing the right thing. Thank you very much. I'm going fishing now, so I gotta go.
Dale Wilson.
Thank you, Richard. I'm Dale Wilson. I live on 4th Street here in Port Angeles. I'm taking a little bit different tack than I had planned when I started thinking about this last week. First of all, it was only Friday a week ago that anybody in the county became aware, anybody in the general public became aware that we were facing a $500,000 issue. And at that time, there was no thought of buying a park for $500,000. In fact, if I may go to this slide over here, I have been in contact with Mr. Lang, and Mr. Lang informs me that when he first bought this property over here, he asked the county repeatedly about this property here that was vacant at the time. And everybody in the county said that will never be developed because the setbacks are not there. You don't have enough room between the county road and the high water mark. And so he would have bought that property just to keep it pristine because he intended to give this property and this property and this property, if he had bought it, to the county or to the Nature Conservancy upon his death. And so he didn't bother to buy that $40,000 piece of property back then because he was absolutely certain by people that he'd asked in the county that it would never be developed. And in fact, half a dozen people whom he knows in the county had asked about this property, and every time someone at the county said to them, you can't build anything on it, don't bother. That's why it was sold for $40,000 to Mr. Sibilak. Mr. Sibilak then, miraculously, had someone from the county to change the high water mark over here. The high water mark that had been there for 6.2 billion years was suddenly, with the stroke of a pen, changed to allow this man enough setbacks to where he could develop this property. Amazing. This hearing should be getting to the bottom of that letter, and whomever wrote that letter that started this entire mess should be the one that's funding this $500,000 payoff today. So, do we have suspects who that is? All of you know who it was. Now let me add one more thing. Back in 1999, this county commission, not these gentlemen here, but the county commission funded a consultant to come forward and do an assessment of how the county citizens feel about the way they're treated by the county government. And they interviewed dozens of people. One of the things that came back to them was that the way that the people are treated by this county government and by the then director of the county Department of Development, they created an elite group of people who could get anything done that they wanted to, while everybody else had to obey the law. Just as you see the high water miraculously moved over here. They had created an elite that could go get things done to the county, get permits issued that were illegal, get permits, get all the waivers illegally done for an elite group of people. And that's what we've got to get to the bottom of today. We have an elite group of people out here that can go, and if they have the connections in the courthouse, they can get whatever they want done, and then it'll be 17 years of the county taxpayers paying the county attorney to defend these lawsuits when people say, hey, you screwed me. So without having this brought on board today and settling this today, we're never going to get to the bottom of this. And we're going to have these shoes drop time after time after time. There's no way of knowing right now how many of these same type settlements are already in the pipeline. Because you're not going to do what it takes to get to the bottom of this. You're not going to put the settlement cost on the responsible parties. You're going to throw it on the taxpayers. Now let's talk about that for a second. There's a very good likelihood that the malefactors who brought us to where we are now have errors and omissions insurance, have fidelity bonds. Has the county gone after these errors and omissions insurance, gone after these fidelity bonds to see if they can fund the settlement? That's a question. Is silence the only answer I'm going to get?
Jim?
I've already told you in writing that no, the county is not, and that unproven allegations, until you go to a court of law, a criminal court of law, and determine that there are, in fact, errors or fidelity issues, you can't make the claim.
Would you say moving a high water mark 20 feet seaward would be reasonable? And you've got a copy of that record, that letter somewhere on record. That's not unchallenged. That's probably something that we could decide today if the evidence was brought in. Or if you were to ask to impanel a grand jury, let them get to the bottom of this. If it's too hot potato to handle politically, bring in a grand jury. It's easily done. Also, I take issue with some of the legal advice you're getting. First of all, I like Martin Nichols a lot. But any of you should know that he has a conflict in advising you. His entire office has a conflict in advising you on how to deliver this, or how to settle this. Also, the mediator that you have, who is also the lead negotiator, lead person for the county's risk pool, he's not going to advise you to throw this on the risk pool because he has a conflict. So that's why it's thrown on the taxpayers all of a sudden without even exploring these other ways to get it funded. So why don't we try and get all of these other potential funding sources discovered, at least investigate them, and then deliver a complete report to the county taxpayers saying, we couldn't get any other type of settlement funding for this, so we're going to have to go to the taxpayers. But don't go to the taxpayers first. We're tired of that. It's happened too many times, and it's probably going to happen too many more times unless and until you get to the bottom of this. Mary Ellen, I think you've done a beautiful job in getting this deal put together. I think it is the best we could have hoped for out of this. So I'm not trying to say let's don't do this deal. I'm saying let's put the responsibility for funding this deal on the responsible parties. I'm so glad we're going to get a park out of this instead of nothing. But let me share this with you. Mr. Lane would have provided that park free of charge if he had ever been treated with any respect by this county. But instead, for 17 years, he's had his request slowballed or ignored or put down in some kind of rabbit hole. That 1999 report that I was talking about, it was mislabeled, as several of these records have been mislabeled, and it was put in storage as a research paper. Now, if you're looking for a consultant's report on how taxpayers are treated, you're probably not going to look under a heading called research papers. So I say that there's been a conscious effort to obfuscate and perhaps hide and cover up these requested records over 17 years. And there's nothing on the record that I found that would disprove that there has been an active cover-up involved with this for at least 17 years. I'm almost. Just to give a little background. When Mr. Lane bought this property, and as I've already said, he mentioned that he had tried to find out if it could ever be developed, and they told him no. And so he wasn't a full-time resident, and so he came back one day, a year or so after he made the purchase, and he realized that there was development going on across the street from him on this lot that could not possibly develop. And so that's right then when he started trying to run down the internal dialogue between the county as to how this thing got permitted. Stonewall. Couldn't get the information. And so he decided he would have to go after Mr. Sibilak, who built the property, and in his mind built it illegally because it couldn't be permitted. And then when he tried to get the information from the county to buttress his lawsuit, couldn't get it. So he had to go against Mr. Sibilak, and because he had worked for 2 years to try to get this information from the county, he couldn't get it, and so he failed in his lawsuit because of the statute of limitations had run. So now, because of his disagreement and his accusing Mr. Sibilak of building an improper building, then Mr. Sibilak, when Mr. Lane got ready to build his home across the street from that property, then Mr. Sibilak was over there taking measurements and called the county and the county went out there and made Mr. Lane move his foundation back 2.5 feet, but never concerned themselves with having Mr. Sibilak get all of the waivers and all of the permissions that he needed in order to do his. So the entire apparatus of county government moved against Mr. Lane when all he was trying to do was to get the county to obey and to get the county to enforce its own codes and its own laws and its own shoreline master plan, none of which have occurred in this situation. Once we answer the question of how we got to this sorry state, then we've got to put the responsibility and the funding on the back of the responsible parties. And I also want to add this to you. Before you get ready to fund this, like you're talking about doing, I have personal knowledge that there is what they call a Private Attorney General Act in federal government that can take all of these situations that we're talking about here and sue the county. And I think it's $1,000 a day for every day that the county allows that building to stay where it is. Even after you get this grand plan settled today, as long as that building stands there, you become the successor liability, and it's going to be $1,000 a day for every day that that has sat there and for every day that it is sitting there until you move it out to Salt Creek or wherever you move it to. With this $500,000 plan, does that include picking up this building and moving it to Salt Creek, doing the plumbing, setting the foundation? We don't even have nearly the final cost of this plan. So, I urge you, transparency, transparency. Have the responsible parties made responsible. Thank you. Thank you.
Jane Clallam.
Jane Hillman, PO Box 204, Clallam, Washington, 98326. Am I the only local for this issue here today? Anyone else from Clallam? No. Okay. I speak today as Vice President of Clallam Bay CQ Chamber of Commerce and as a resident of Clallam Bay. I'm also a storekeeper there, running the food co-op, which is a community-owned business. I have personally watched this issue unfolding for many years. I mean, really personally. I am close to several of the people who are closely involved in the interactions, and I've known the issues involving the property and the foreshore. I was resident in this home as a house and dog sitter during the Banda Archie earthquake and tidal wave. I watched the waters rising up and threatening to break in the front windows of this home during a storm that hit Seattle a few years back. That water backwashed through the straits and came straight down. At this time, I observed the foundation start to wash out on several of the other homes on the same waterfront from this storm, whilst the waves broke over Saltaire Street, right where in front of Scott Lane's property and Joanne Miller's property. There were no homes to stop the raging water, so where there are homes, the waves are blocked. I would like to be in those homes permanently. And I have concerns and I have raves. Firstly, I'm really impressed with what the county has done and the people who are involved at this present time. My concerns are I feel that the county is leaving themselves open through precedent, which is what a couple of people have mentioned today. I feel that the public should have been brought into the discussion before now at some level. I know that things are private, but I think a lot of people are pretty angry at finding so much in the media before they knew what was going on. I feel that the monies involved in the proposed purchase of the 3 properties are excessively high, and quite a few people in our area have reported the same thing. I have concerns about the unstable nature of the foreshore and wonder how long the asset will be viable. I wonder how the residents of this tiny cul-de-sac will react to public use and public parking. It is really tiny. And at the dead end of this Saltaire Street, there is a magnificent tree. And I would hate to see that tree removed for parking. That's my personal love of the tree. We, Clallam Bay and CQ, and we are the gem of the West End, if you've been out there recently. How many of you have been out there in the last year? Thank you. We love you. This last weekend has just been crazy. I'm aching all over. 3 13-hour days on my feet, and I can hardly stand. We, Clallam Bay and CQ, are short of accommodation, especially healthy, stable homes. And that a beautiful home is being removed from the residential market, it grieves us. If that house is moved, which I believe is the plan, how much will this cost the county extra, and where will the home go? I believe it is on a concrete slab, and we do have very limited land. DNR abuts us all the way. We are in desperate need of housing out there. We're having teachers having to turn down jobs because they can't find anywhere to live. They are my concerns. They're not necessarily negative concerns, but they are concerns. My raves are that I am happy that the foreshore will be accessed by the public. As a store owner, and I give a lot of tourist information out, I'm also involved with the Chamber, so many people just cannot work out how to get to the foreshore. The bridge is in, and we are just enchanted by the bridge being in summer. People don't know they're walking on private land. They have no idea about that. Also, I'm personally pleased to have public land on the foreshore. I just find that really sad to think that people can own such wealth and keep other people out. My position is our Chamber has worked hard along with the county to establish a teeny tiny public recreation space in CQ. It's a public space to be known as a pocket park. Much time and effort have gone into this, but it is not happening due to legalities. I would really love to see that promoted. It's a tiny little area at the dead end of Commercial Street, and we've been working for years to try and get access to that, but the legalities are in our way on that. So my priority is that we need public dry camping. I see it on the list there that Joel was showing us. Families have been coming to our beach for years and agreed that they can no longer take a family vacation at their traditional place by the Salish Sea. As a storekeeper and interface with tourists, I see this as a far greater priority and not something that can be achieved on Saltaire Street. Finally, as one of the District 3 Commissioners on the Planning Commission, I ask, should disputes be settled by bullying? Thank you.
Senator Marcus.
Celina Barkhouse, County Treasurer of the House. I have found out a lot this last week that I didn't know before, and a lot of things are starting to make sense now that didn't make sense to me before. I want to thank Mr. Lane for creating the meticulous public record paper trail that he did in his 3 lawsuits. I will consider them a treasure trove of relevant material for a long time to come. Commissioner Chapman, I do not accept your apology of the other day for not timely informing me, and for that matter, for not timely informing me, the taxpayers, when you had the chance and the duty. You've been here long enough to know that spending this kind of general fund taxpayer reserves over a major holiday weekend without hardly any public process simply does not pass the smell test. As the chair of this board and as far senior member, I hold you responsible for the stake. Prosecutor Nichols, I do hope that you realize that you crossed a serious line earlier this year when you sued me and used your high and mighty powers as prosecutor to sue me so wrongfully on behalf of the Peninsula Bay News. I sure hope, more for my sake than yours, that you won't dig yourself in any deeper by crossing that line again. Commissioner Peach, Commissioner Rosales, to the extent that you really believe that it was okay for the county to sue me, let alone sue me on behalf of the Peninsula Bay News, you were seriously misguided. But until you are ready to take step 1, which is to accept the fact that we have a serious problem here in this courthouse, there is unfortunately no one working on the 12-step road to recovery. In the meantime, I'll continue saying my surrender prayers. Thank you.
Catherine Rose.
Hi, I'm Catherine Gross. I live on Skeleton this one. I'm not going to be as eloquent as the people that came up before me, and I have to say, I think they made really important points. in favor of the settlement, but only solely from a practical standpoint, because I don't think it resolves any of the issues of transparency or responsibility. And I hope the county is going to pursue making those responsible pay for this. From a practical standpoint, it seems like we could end up going to court, we're going to spend more money on attorneys. When we get there, the court may say, hey, you had a negotiated settlement, and that settlement would have cost the county a lot more than I can charge you in penalties. So I think if you go to court at this point, having negotiated a settlement that had a lot of, resolves a lot of problems. This settlement, it doesn't just resolve the issue of the providing those documents to the Langs, but it also resolves a lot of long-standing issues. So the settlement in itself, I think, is a good deal, and it's probably going to cost you a lot less than going to court. And if I was a judge and I saw this settlement, and then you still came to court anyway, I would really sock it to you. But the problem is, how are you going to resolve the issue of someone taking responsibility? In my personal opinion, I think, Mark Nichols, I think you should resign.
Sean White.
I rescind my request to speak.
Jeanette Rosen.
I rescind my request to speak.
It's the end of our sign-up list. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak before the board? Come on up, state your name and address.
I'd like to use the remaining timeline, right, because I had forgotten. Just briefly. The question I was trying to bring out before was, is the county opening itself up to continuing litigation from the surrounding property owners? Is this going to just cause more liability to the county? Now, I realize that then falls under the risk pool and not directly out of the county's budget. That's a consideration you really need to do. Are they opening themselves up to liability from the property owners around there by not going through all of the processes to inform them? I also want to put a brief statement in about public records requests and things. I've done over 50 of them, not all of them with Clallam County, most of it with State of Washington. Mr. Nichols has been involved in our $20 million lawsuit against the county and our current appeal to our $300,000 judgment for the attorney's fees refunded to us. It seems to be a standard operating procedure to delay things, postpone things until the statute of limitations goes away. It's something that happens. I'm not saying that they haven't responded to all of the public records requests. The redactions, some of them are very questionable, and if I had the time, I would have brought suit. But you can't bring suit for everyone that when you redact 1,000 pages of a 2,000-page report, you can't bring all the suits. One other thing that I would like to say is I would like to thank Celinda for standing up for her integrity, and standing up to the corruption that is within this county. We've exposed a lot of stuff in our lawsuits, and it's there, and it needs to be weeded out. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make one more remark. It'll be very brief. Gentlemen of the Commission, if you'll recall, in the recent Charter Review Committee, they highly recommended creating an ombudsman position at the county. An ombudsman position would have forestalled all of this because an ombudsman would be able to have taken Mr. Lane by the hand, gone to each one of these departments, and demanded what he was asking for. There wouldn't have been an opportunity to cover up. I want to ask you again to create and fund a completely unbiased ombudsman, not associated with any departments, but fully intended to help people in their dealings with the county, because right now it is a very difficult morass to navigate by yourself, and most people, perhaps designedly so, throw up their hands and say heck with it. So an ombudsman would go a long way, and I certainly hope you'll consider that again. Thank you.
in litigation with the county, litigation with Mr. Nichols. I would also like to point out that in our 50-some-odd public records requests through the county, we have been snowballed, we have been postponed, and the common denominator seems to be postpone it until after the statute of limitations expires and then just come up with the paperwork. Here it is. One thing that I would like to point out that the county is in a position right now to not ever end the litigation with us. And when I say that, it's because Mark Nichols, even though he's got a staff full of attorneys, has hired outside help. Peterson Buchanan, that firm, is now taking care of all of it. They don't want it to end. They get to bill the taxpayers for every piece of paper or every phone call they make. They get to bill the taxpayers. So here it is, 6.5 years on a marijuana case with no end in sight. How do we end these things? How do we take back our government and do the right thing for the taxpayer? How do we? We do know one thing, that as soon as the litigation ends with me and my brother and several other defendants, or people, that Mr. Nichols has got a bar complaint that he has to survive. And that bar complaint is for withholding exculpatory information and Brady information on his very officers. It's the same that he has been accused of here. It's the same that, according to the newspaper, that he admitted to. That he did, in fact, have the information, but just didn't give it out. I can go on and on about stuff that has been withheld in our case. I can go on about detectives having some 600 hours writing reports, writing affidavits in support of search warrants, writing search warrants, but none of it was produced under court order. And now we find out that we knew already that it is deep in the J drive of the county. Every keystroke that's ever been made on a county computer is in your archives. And every keystroke that's ever been made in support of a search warrant has got to be saved for 75 years to outlive a life sentence. I would like this board to go ahead and dig into that. Dig into what I'm saying. Find out about the stuff that I'm telling you that has been buried and buried and buried. Thank you.
James Preston, Port Angeles. Thank you for letting me address you. I'll be brief. I would like to remind everyone that the purpose for this meeting is to discuss a settlement of ongoing litigation. And as such, I fully agree with Mr. Nichols that this is not the time and place for a full rehash of a 17-year history. If for some reason the settlement does not happen, if it's delayed past its end date, which I believe is what, July 15th, it falls apart, and then you can find yourselves liable for a lot more money, potentially. So I think you need to concentrate on that. I again compliment you for yourselves. Mr. Chapman, I'd like to remind you that you are the longest serving commissioner that we have. You've been here for 16 years. So you weren't here when this started 17 years ago, but you probably have a better history, better knowledge of everything that's happened. And if there are public record request issues of all the commissioners, of all the people, I would like you at some point, when there's a better time to have a hearing on all of this, to discuss why you haven't done a better job of it. Or, if I'm wrong, what you have done to try to push forward, a better process for responding to public records, because you've been here the whole time. Thank you very much.
Anybody else who should make comment?
Good morning. My name is Mike Doherty. I live at 617 South E.
A couple of process concerns I've had, and I generally agree with most of the questions today. A few I don't have the background, but I generally agree with most previous speakers. One was, it seems irregular, in my experience on the board, that this handwritten document is the proposed settlement agreement that was agreed to by somebody, and I don't know what level, the board, the staff, who signed off on the 60-day requirement. And then, as was noted by other speakers, the public was only informed in a very short time that this was going to come available. The document itself has additions, deletions, at least one incoherent sentence. It's just not a finalized, formal, professional document if you read through it on the website. And I only just quickly skimmed it this morning, so I don't have a lot of comments, but I will talk to some specifics. The other tradition is that usually these graphics, one or two would have been in the paper, they would have been on the website, to alert people to what's the subject matter of the hearing. What are the options involved, tied to a narrative usually. And with a website, you could easily have done that for this purpose and done it very well. You could also had explained some of the options, some of the history that Mr. Winborn talked about, but that wasn't done. People had to show up today with little notice to try to get that information. And it was good information this morning. I guess the biggest procedural concern for me is this rush to settle. And who initiated and who agreed to the 60-day term? Who delayed the public notice, as inadequate as it was? Because again, you're not fully informing the public, and there are some folks in Clallam Bay that were concerned, asked me a couple of questions, they didn't know much about it. And in Jane's defense, actually she should have promoted, she's a great promoter for Clallam Bay CQ, but Clallam Bay Fun Days is this weekend. So if you feel guilty about something, come to Clallam Bay, buy a hot dog, contribute to the scholarship and the fireworks auction, and buy a pie for like $100 if you're an active bidder.
200.
A lot of good things in Clallam Bay this weekend. And the fact that the board approved in the paper, and I know, I'm used to the Daily News misconstruing some things, but to a lot of the public, this is a done deal. People have talked to me, they didn't show up today because the board approved the settlement. If you read the fine print, they didn't approve the final settlement. They wanted public participation, and that's what today's meeting is about. But to a lot of the public, and I suspect many in Clallam Bay CQ, it was approved by the Board of Commissioners. A 2-to-1 vote, but the one vote that was concerned about procedures didn't talk about procedures that he was concerned about or remedies to address those procedures. It was just, I'm voting no because I won't vote, whatever it was, because of procedures. You heard a lot of questions today about procedures. Things that weren't addressed, like this mystery box of evidence in the basement, the evidence on the CD. To me, that should be fully explained to the public. It came up late, I think, one newspaper article. That's not very adequate discussion. So generally, and just skimming through the document, the county has the obligation to buy the C Black property. But I didn't see a cost specific to the C Black property. One could look at the appraised value, market values, talk to realtors, and find out, is that a good deal for the county? So personally, I'd like to see that advertised. The county will purchase the 2 waterfront lots from Mr. Lang, $210,000. And I have the 2 board members here today, and has Commissioner Peach actually been to those 2 lots? And I know you won't answer probably, but those aren't buildable lots. They're eroding, and you're paying $210,000. And at some point in our lifetime, probably that erosion will get into the county engineer's domain, and what's he going to do to protect the road once you've got these high-cost lots that, quote, could be public park, but selling it as a public park, it's different on the C Block property, but the 2 that are so narrow and have active erosion, that's not really quality park. It does provide access along beach, and I agree that's a great goal to keep doing that incrementally until you get to the 26 acres of Cliff Point. But the way this is done, and because of a couple other provisions in the settlement that I'll get to, I just don't think it's an adequate protection for the public interest. Then you're going to remove the house and the outbuilding. There's no cost listed for what that's going to be. I'd encourage you to recycle that house, have Monroe Brothers or somebody agree with somebody to remove the house, set it down as a good quality house, so is the, quote, other building, which was an issue as far as its use, but it's a quality building. And then, who's going to pay for the relocation? What are the restoration costs on the beach, the edge of the road, the public access on the road for disabled people and getting down to the beach if you're disabled? Another provision says county will remove the bulkhead. Are there permits? Because you're required to get the permits in the agreement. What's the cost of permits? How long will that take? And who's going to pay for the restoration, the removal? What are the actual costs of removing that riprap? Now, probably the road department could do it, store it, satellite shop, and reuse some of that rock. But none of that's addressed in the document. It could be, and I think it would assuage some public concerns. Keeping the document confidential. Now, there are a lot of ways that attorneys like to keep things confidential as much as they can, as legally as they can. But for some public officials who like to keep it confidential, sealed record, that's a great way to cover your record from the public. And I disagree with that. And the commissioners probably will remember, I couldn't get a second vote to have a public discussion about the age discrimination case. $3.4 million plus all the county costs involved in that, staff costs. It was a large case, but those records were sealed. The Board of Commissioners were never warned at $1 million, $2 million, $3 million exposure that case was coming along. It was pretty much an open check to the firm that now is involved in this case. So again, I'd encourage the board to work with the prosecutor within the law to find out when should you be warned when there's an exposure that's very costly to the county. As I recall that case, the reinsurer said, this is a loser, settle that case or we're not going to cover you. Now, it's probably not that simple, but that's my recollection of what happened. And so it was discussed. That's a very high value, high exposure case. And it could be that you were headed this way. I don't know that, but it sounds like from some people that there were going to be some records sealed. Now, it's great that it's on the internet. It should have been done that way from day one. Parties agree to bear their own costs. So what are the total county costs involved in this? I'm going to be interesting. Several people have asked about that today. Lots will be dedicated to public use, 2 of the lots. So it seems like there is some ground there, but you're going to have costs taking away that riprap in a different clause in the agreement. What are those costs going to be? And then more importantly, once you remove that riprap, what's going to happen to the neighboring owner? And I haven't been out there in a few weeks, but as I recall, the neighboring owner to the east has riprap protection on their lot. I don't know if that was permitted or not, but it's there. So what's the county, if you remove the riprap and there's more exposure to storm damage, which is increasing because of climate change, what's going to happen to the county's costs on that next lot for protection? It's not addressed in the agreement. There's also the protection that Mr. Lang wanted for development restrictions and also protecting his view. So could the public build a kiosk for family barbecues, things like they did, the Lions Club did at the park that Jane referenced? Probably not because of that clause. Will cars be able to park on that lot? Now there are some houses that looking out their front window, if you park a car, a truck, a trailer on the public right-of-way, you're obstructing the view of those folks, and that's not covered. So to protect the public interest, public parking, public access in this, quote, new park, I think that should be addressed, but it's not in there. So there were a number of concerns. I won't get into all of them, but those are some things I think could strengthen the agreement, and they get a great deal. And again, I've long supported having that access through a very open process. You could, if you'd slow down, you'd probably get some public money, or CEO, Nature Conservancy, others to purchase this land and not spend the taxpayers. But there's this 60-day clause. Who agreed to that? Who proposed that to the board? Again, it's a concern. You know, this is the 50th anniversary of the Freedom of Information Act at the federal level, and the Obama administration has made some great inroads in the act to make more accountability, more transparency in the public process. And as you know, the state, in our state, has had a lot of it because of case law, but expansion of accountability, transparency, and all of it. Recently, in Clallam County, there's been some issues. The age discrimination case, problems with open public meetings, compliance, the whole DCD investigation. I could never find a second vote to be concerned about that, even though they were alleged felonies, misdemeanors. Some of the same issues were involved when the board sued the treasurer. In the DCD case, the commissioners, the prosecutor, gosh, the risk pool, they couldn't find something because it was an elected official involved. Lo and behold, when they got excited because the treasurer pushed back and was doing her job, they could find 4 actions to take against the treasurer. Same type of elected official. But there was a different motive, I think, in that case. So it's a bad trend, I think, some of the activities the last few years, and I was involved in some of that, but hopefully not all of it. And this looks right for another situation that just, I think, is ripe for a blemish on Clallam County. So overall, when I served Clallam County as a commissioner, one of my things was working on public access. It was long listed in the comprehensive plan as a goal. Meeting after meeting, people wanted it. Small communities wanted it. Probably I could list 4 or 5 public access parks, so I was lead commissioner. So I'm sympathetic with acquiring the land, but do it in a way that protects the public interest and addresses many of the concerns. While you're at it, I think you should look at the historic DOT 60-foot right-of-way that runs on the east edge of the county park toward the tavern. Now, it might upset a few tavern patrons, but maybe Ross could have a little flexible bumper log there for parking or something, but there's an old DOT right-of-way. I think the state would surplus it. It used to service the ferry when the mosquito fleet came in there before the highway was built. So it would be a great slice of property. I think I'd urge the board to support the Coast Guard, the acquisition of the Coast Guard of 26 acres. If you need a volunteer to help write some grants, I'd work on that. Long range, I encourage the board to work with state parks, I think, to encourage them to put a destination park at Hoopo River State Park. There may come a time, and it's been discussed in the past, where the very long, thousands and thousands of feet of nice sandy beach on the Clallam Bay side could be acquired and run by the county. And again, there would be public money to give the state parks if in lieu of the county having to pay for it. So it would be a great asset, I think, and it would concentrate county service on that beach, while hopefully state parks would invest in putting a destination state park at Hoopo River and the 7,000 acres they acquired. Hopefully they won't have to sell that. So overall, I support some kind of a settlement, but certainly there's a lot that you've heard today and there's more, I'm probably abusing my time, but that should be addressed. And this whole rush to do this within 60 days, and it comes to the public with about 1 week, is inadequate. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to make comments before the board?
Still comment?
Jane Hillman again. The outbuilding that is being mentioned, I believe historically has been recorded as a garage. It is actually an apartment. The people that own it used to stay there. I never met them while I was sitting there, but you will have plumbing and electricity, etc. to be looked at there, and I know that that hasn't been approved. So, thank you.
Anybody else wish to make comment? Mr. Linsville?
I apologize. I had to take it off here.
Anybody else wish to make comment before the board? If not, what's the board's wishes on the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing at this time.
I second.
Public hearing is motion and second to close public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
carries. Any comments from the board?
I've got a couple of questions at this point. I'm wondering, since there were several questions from the audience about the 60-day settlement terms, if anyone who is present at the settlement discussions would like to talk about that, where that came from.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Brian Lund, Deputy Prosecuting Attorney. What I can say about the 60-day time period was that was a time period that was negotiated between the parties inside mediation. It was previously contemplated to be shorter, but in an effort to provide sufficient time, the parties agreed to push it out to 60 days. So that was a term that was negotiated by the parties, and then when the draft settlement, or the proposed settlement agreement was brought back, it was sanctioned as part of the decision to continue forward with those that time frame. So that's the origin of the 60 days. It was a negotiated term of the agreement with the input brought in by the parties in the room, and it was ultimately sanctioned by the BOCC to continue to go forward. There was just one aspect. The lead mediation, the person that was leading the mediation was not Duncan Phobes. Duncan Phobes was the consultant assisting our mediated efforts. The lead mediator was a retired judge out of Thurston County named Thomas McPhee, and he's with the JAMS facility where this mediation was brokered. Did that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes, thank you.
Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, one additional one. Because we're dealing with a couple of different concepts here. We're dealing with the concept of mitigating risk, minimizing our liability, and certainly we're also dealing with the concept of accountability. I'm wondering if Mr. Nichols, you or anyone else whose departments or individual actions have been singled out in public comment today would like to talk at all about the issue of accountability and what can we do, in your opinion, to show and in fact be accountable to the public while at the same time working to minimize our liability to the extent possible. What can we do to be better accountable to the public in this regard?
Several thoughts come to mind, Commissioner. First and foremost, I think that in all of my years of working for Clallam County government, this board has been, I think, consistently more committed to transparency than others that I've worked with in time. And that's not intended as a slight pass over at all. I think county government has a rich history of promoting transparency. I think at a greater level than exists in sister governments, and that's, I think, as a result of a policy pronouncement coming from the board. I think that there are a number of elected officials in office at this point in time who share that vision. And part and parcel of accountability is explaining the why behind the what. Not simply reaching a conclusion and just assuming that the citizens will trust that you make the right one, but really getting down the weeds. And I think that we've gone about as far as we can, again, at this stage in the process, and providing as much of an explanation as we can. It's not a pretty picture. And no one here is trying to hide anything. To the contrary, we released a statement that is, I would characterize it as an embarrassing statement as to where the county is in relation to the discrete issue of records management. To get to the heart of your question, I think that the discussions that occur post-settlement, post-dismissal of the suit, really will allow for the issue of accountability to be best addressed. And if we didn't have concerns over statements being made now, possibly being used against the interest of the county in a way that would cut against the risk considerations that the board's weighing and measuring now, you could go into much greater detail. The DCD director could go into greater detail. I could go into greater detail. I think all of us have more we'd like to say, and that will go a long ways towards answering questions, allowing people to make informed decisions. Part of what's complicating this situation is that there is a lengthy history to this, and through that lead-up, that 17 years, we've had so many different elected officials in office who
have advanced different philosophies, different policy interests. And so we're at a point in time where we're inheriting all of that. It's a bit of a mixed bag. We're trying to make the best decision in the interest of the county. But I think ultimately explaining the facts to the citizens is at the heart of accountability. People will make decisions, and that's as it should be. But I don't have a better suggestion at this stage of the process than simply, building in that bookmark and letting people know that today's discussion is not the end, but frankly, from my perspective at least, really the beginning of a broader discussion. And it will certainly focus on the history, operation of different departments, why decisions were made. I believe that, as has been echoed before, there's many people who made decisions with the best of intentions. Some of them may look back and say, if I had to do it all over, I might do it differently. Being able to now view the situation through that unique lens we call hindsight. So that would be my response to the board at this point.
Thanks.
I'd like to say something too. When I came into office a year and a half ago, Mr. Lang walked into my office a week after I was there, and he brought a stack of papers like this much, and he said, "I want you to solve this problem for me. I've tried with every other director to do this," and I thought, I'm going to really try to do that. I'm going to give him that. But then right after that, he got involved in 4 other cases. I mean, I like Mr. Lang, but he's a retired Microsoft executive. And he said that his nickname at Microsoft was not Scott, it was Scott Fang, because he will not let go of the situation if he feels that he's been wrong. And he did feel that he's been wrong, but I'll also, as an architect, go back and say that back in 1996, the county was letting a lot of things be built, like these 400 square foot exempt buildings that weren't intended on people living there, but they're all over the county now. So you have to take down this one building because Mr. Lang's going to like hammer on you, or you have to come up with a different type of solution to keep all this. I mean, we spent, our department probably has spent 30% of our time working on issues because of this, something that happened 17 years ago. So you just have to figure out, not pointing fingers anymore, starting from where you are and how are you going to solve this problem. And this does it, but it may not do it, like I said, perfectly, but it gets us started to start over. We have to start over. We can't keep going like this.
I do have a couple more comments, but since this is in Commissioner Peach's district, I'm wondering if Commissioner Peach, have you got anything that you would like to add before I start talking?
No, hopefully my mute is off. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I appreciate very much the engagement because I fully support transparency. This is a tough situation with the timeline we had to deal with and adverse consequences if we didn't perform within a specific timeline. I think that we should proceed with the proposed action, and following comments, I'm prepared to make a motion to that effect.
Okay, I just have a couple more comments, and I certainly have been listening to all of your comments very carefully today, as I have over the last week or two. And, I think fundamentally, the concept of accountability is easy to understand how important that is and how important that feels. And I am equally as upset as any taxpayer or citizen of Clallam County, as I imagine many folks sitting at the table here are, that when we're in the situation that we're in. It is, as has been pointed out today, we're at the culmination of a series of mistakes. and it's natural to want to look for accountability. And it's important in the sense that we want to make sure that we don't find ourselves in this situation again. I would just like to restate my view, and that is that I believe what we have witnessed here is not just a failure of an individual or individuals. I think that what we've witnessed here is what I would consider a systemic failure of the county. It's an organizational failure, it's a failure of leadership, it's a failure at the departmental level, it's a failure at the personal level, and we recognize that and are actively working to turn that around. Unfortunately, this is a failure that has a large potential liability, and there have been a series of conversations going back several months now to try and determine what our best option would be to save county taxpayers and citizens liability and to save money. Early on, the intent was not to settle this case. Early on, the intent was to go to trial. But during the course of time, our potential liability exploded to the point where we decided, and again, this was decided over a series of discussions that I would categorize as robust discussions, covering several different options, covering the potential dangers of pursuing a settlement. In this case, for example, are we setting a precedent? And the decision at every step along the way from the leadership team now in place is that for specifically for the important aspect of capping our liability, that negotiating a settlement was in the best interest of the county and in the best interest of taxpayers. It's nice, or it will be nice, if it works out such that we get a park. I'm hoping that that's the case. I'm hoping that we can work through the permitting and other issues such that we can make this into a functional park. And if so, then that's even better. As an aside, that would perhaps even mitigate the impact to the general fund in the grand scheme of things, because there would be the potential to utilize some park acquisition funds to offset a portion of what we're accomplishing here. So, because our liability or our potential liability is so great, I believe that this is the right thing to do. Many of you were concerned about how secretive this has been, and you know, it's usually when you hear about lawsuits being settled, you hear about them after the fact, and you hear both parties saying that they're not at liberty to discuss the terms of the settlement of the lawsuit. And I would like to note that because we recognize that this is a big deal, that it's a contentious issue, that it involves a lot of money, and that it is complicated, we went to the other parties to the settlement and asked if they would be willing to release the terms of the settlement ahead of time, as we were able to do, and that we are doing everything that I at least know how to do to try and have this conversation in public to the extent possible. One speaker, at least one speaker, asked about whether there was a rush to settle in this case. And again, I would say that that was not my experience, having participated in the discussions leading up to the settlement. In fact, the decision to pursue settlement was not our original course of action in this case until the facts changed. And when we did decide to pursue a settlement as our best option, it was fully and thoroughly discussed by all of the people present at the meeting. And with regard to what some of the ongoing costs are, those are valid questions. I'm not certain what the cost of removing the seawall is. I'm not certain what the cost of moving the house is going to be. So we're not trying to say that every detail is left to figure out. Now, we're looking into those details. However, even if a county park never comes to pass for one reason or another in this instance, my belief is that we are still capping our potential liability at a level that is likely to have saved us significant, when I say us, I mean county taxpayers, significant resource over the course of time. So with that in mind, Commissioner Peach, did you want to make a motion?
Thank you, Mark. So what I'd like to do is make the following motion. I move to approve adoption of a budget emergency that transfers $550,000 from general fund reserve to human resources risk management, and from there to claims settlement as detailed in the budget change forms presented at the July 5th, 2016 public hearing.
Commissioner Peach, earlier in the course of testimony, Administrator Jones noted that that request needs to be for 518, rather than 550,000, in case you wanted to amend your motion.
So the change is from 550 to 518, is that correct?
That's correct.
I accept that friendly amendment.
And I'll second.
So it's been moved and seconded. Any further comments?
Yes, I'm sorry, I do have one additional comment. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this earlier. There was additional conversation today about the public meeting that was held last Thursday with regard to the county's handling of public records requests, and I would categorize that meeting as a step in the right direction. Not everything that is, there are some steps being taken already based on the content of that meeting, and in fact that were put into place beforehand using available funds as Mary Ellen's department is doing to hire extra staff. And I would like taxpayers to understand that this leadership team is committed to rapidly implementing the organizational changes that need to be made such that we are minimizing our chance of finding ourselves in this situation in the future. And I can't underscore that significantly enough. That's all I've got.
So it's moved and seconded. I would just express to the board, a week ago, this was on Monday's work session, I cautioned the board not to move it to Tuesday. You guys did. I cautioned people not to sign a real estate document last week. Those documents were signed. With the two of you, there is great authority. I would caution you in the future to be careful to make sure that the public, one thing I've learned for 16 years, almost 16 years, is that when the board makes decisions and the public is not fully, that has not had a time to understand those decisions, that the that's not necessarily the best way. There's still over a week before this arbitrary 60-day handwritten note, which I still, for me, once that became public, this whole argument of a rush handwritten note, settlements, not even court papers, we're not even sure what we're settling. I would still ask one more time publicly, we have another week to get court documents, to get legal papers so that the public knows how we're spending the tax dollars. It may end up being a good settlement agreement, but that handwritten note is not a full settlement agreement. It is a handwritten note which does not meet the full complexity of this case. So once again, I did last Monday, urge the board not to move it to Tuesday's agenda, urge the board to Tuesday's agenda not to adopt it. Documents were signed last week. Now I'm urging the board one more time, at least wait until legal papers are drawn up. At least wait until the public knows exactly what we're signing on for. We have all the costs, all the questions that have been asked. If we go through that process, I think that the board can say we did our job, we listened. But at this point, we've heard, and I've heard from many people throughout the community in the last week. I have to assume the two of you heard from many people last week. We still have time. There's no rush. I don't understand the rush today. So I'll just put on the record, I'm going to vote no, because I think there's time to have legal papers drawn up, to have this fully vetted, and explained to the public so we know exactly what our liability is. So there's a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
No. That concludes this matter. Is there any member of the public wishing to make comment? General comment?
I would like to actually explain what the handwritten document was, because I was at the mediation. But you don't keep drafting like it's some mysterious document. It's not. It was a mediation. This mediation, there's two rooms and two separate groups of people, and the judge goes back and forth, and he told the attorney that was sitting at the table, he says, write all this down. And that was what's written down, and we all signed it. It's not this mysterious piece of paper. I just wanted to say that. It's not a mysterious piece of
What we
paper.
haven't explained to the public is the full liability to the county taxpayer.
That's the other thing I was going to point out, that the full liability is not even known, and this $550,000 may not be enough to do everything that is going to have to be done to come out of this deal smelling like a rose, which includes moving the house and other things. But the point I wanted to circle back on is Mark Nichols talking about transparency. Guys, this is not transparency. For you to have this hearing against the chairman's best advice and to schedule it on the cusp of a major holiday, that's not transparency, especially when you have several other days left in this, quote, unassailable deadline. I had several conversations amounting to a couple of hours with Mr. Lane yesterday. I can almost assure you, if you called him and said, would you put off this deadline for a couple of months, a couple of 6 months, I'm almost certain he would if you were to tell him, as long as you are going to do an investigation of who the culpable people are and attempt to hold them responsible, I'll hold this deadline in abeyance until you have all the time you need to find the culpable parties and deal with them. Also, Mr. Simplak, the other party in here, he's about to get twice the value of his property, twice the fair market value of his property. I can almost assure you he will wait a few months to get twice the value. I certainly would, anybody in this room would. So there's really no artificial necessity for this urgency that you're trying to put on us. It's another lack of transparency, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
Any member of the public wishing to make comment?
James Preston, Port Angeles. I'm sorry to be speaking for a third time. I caution the residents of this county to listen to comments that are made up here by anybody, including myself, where they're spoken as if it's the gospel truth. We heard one of our valiant journalists earlier saying that the mediator was the head of a risk fund and he had a vested interest to cut a deal favorable to the risk fund. Then the attorney of record for the county, Mr. Wisp, I believe, Brian, clarified and said it was a retired judge that was provided by JAMS, Judicial Arbitration Mediation. That's what you're supposed to do. So there have been a lot of things said here that may not be true. So please, let's everybody keep the blood pressure down. I again say, let's move forward with the settlement, and in the spirit of let's get the truth out after the smoke clears, after the settlement's done. Then is the time for hearings and any type of investigation you want on a history of this matter. It may actually help improve the document request process, which could be part of the hearings that you've got going on, or what you've started to improve your document response process. Thank you very much.
Anybody else wishing to make comment?
Max Rainwater, Courthouse, Washington. I'd like to address this issue of this mysterious handwritten document. Is it your contention that this is the very first time, or that last week was the first time that you had any knowledge of this?
Yes.
Nobody on the board had any idea that this settlement was being hammered out between parties?
It was
You
the
had-
first time it was released, Matthew.
I'm not saying that it was the first time that it was released. What I'm asking was last week the first time you had any idea of what was being addressed in the settlement?
It was the first time it was released.
That's not my question, sir. That's not my question.
That was my point. It was not
Okay.
released until the public until last week.
What you're saying is you're addressing it as a mysterious handwritten document, and it's coming across as saying that you had no knowledge of these
That is
proceedings.
not what it meant. I meant it was mysterious to the public because.
Okay, so you knew about this, so the board knew about this a lot longer than the public did, which is a given. Somebody at some level made a decision as to when to make this public. I'd like to know who it was.
It was the board.
Okay, so it's the board and
It was actually Commissioner Peach's motion last week.
Okay. I think to try to call it as a mysterious handwritten document and to say you didn't know what was in it
That's not what I said.
is false.
That's not what I said, man.
That was, okay, all right, that's what I wanted, that's what I wanted to say. That's what I wanted to address. I think that the calls for Mark Nichols to resign are premature and unwarranted. I think Mr. Nichols, as being a newly elected official, fairly newly elected official, and anybody else on this that's having to deal with this in the last 17 years that has not been on here as long as, say, you have, that has had knowledge of this incident from the time. They're making the best out of a bad situation that they were handed when they attained their position. And I think that being held accountable for something that happened almost 20 years ago, and they're trying to deal with it the best way they can, and saying you should resign, is unwarranted.
I feel I need to respond to that.
Steve Baker, 11 Glendale. I want to thank you also, Mr. Chapman, for standing up and trying to cause some sanity to this, what appears to be 60-day blackmail, which whoever agreed to it knows they can't possibly do the processes in the 60 days. So thank you for that. I will bring up a point to counter what you just said. Mr. Nichols has been the civil deputy for this county for, I think it was since 2006. He was handling this from pretty much almost day one as the civil deputy. He just got elected, but he's been in that position for a long time. There are several other cases out there that have a significant liability in this county, which you guys need to really understand. And the exemptions that are within the risk pool, there's a whole bunch of them that could fall through those cracks, like the Public Records Act. Risk pool's not responsible, so they're absolutely willing to get this settled because in the risk pool, the surrounding suits that come out of it, risk pool might have to be liable. Our suit is one of those, and I will tell you right out, there's information that can bankrupt this county, and they need to be very, very careful and try and get this settled. Not like the settlement that they came with absolutely no faith or intention to settle 9 months ago. Mr. Nichols' office didn't even show up. The rest of the participants within OPEC did. You can look into some of these things, because this liability is just growing and growing. Thank you.
Francisco de la Cruz. I know that the recommendations are made were strong, and I stand behind them simply from previous experience. When a team has failed in a very severe way, it's not fair to the team members that remain to try to rescue their credibility. The credibility I had with this organization has taken beatings for the last, I've been here now going on 10 years. And this is one of the most clearly, easily avoidable things, had only people gotten serious about their responsibilities. And the fact that it's 10 years old or 17 years old only throws fire on the thing. I think it's unfair to expect lepers to change their skin. You got key players that have been involved in one form or another for multiple years. And for them to make the kinds of changes that are required for this organization to get out of the mire that it finds itself in, I'd be shocked. And I'd be pleasantly shocked, but I'd still be shocked. I think it's time to start anew. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to comment? If not, we already lost Commissioner Peach, so review the calendar is this week's meeting, and this meeting, and next week, Monday morning at 9 a.m. The work session. There's no objections, so ordered.